You're listening to the best of American Heartland with Dr. Grace Vuoto.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. You are hearing a song that I chose for this segment. It really is the sensation that I felt when I was reviewing all the evidence. I really felt sick. I cannot believe that this is happening to this beautiful republic. I had heard about the scandal circulating the birth certificate, but I couldn't quite believe my eyes when I began to explore the evidence. One of the things that I write in the article that you will find on worldtribune.com is that many of us who are concerned about this birth certificate issue would rather be wrong than right. Because if this certificate is a fake, which we know that it is, so I should not even say if this actually goes to a congressional hearing and this becomes a leading story in the minds of the American public, we will be embroiled in a constitutional crisis. Unpacking all of this for us right here today is the man who has spearheaded this investigation, the man who knows all the evidence like the back of his hand. I call him an American hero, Lieutenant Mike Zullo. Welcome, Lieutenant Zullo.
How are you this evening?
I'm well. Tell us about your credentials first and foremost. I think a lot of Americans who hear this story for the first time are very skeptical. And obviously they want to know, what are the credentials of the folks that are doing this investigation, and do they have a specific axe to grind?
Okay, well, on the axe to grind, I can tell you no. The credentials are, I'm a former police officer as a detective in the state of New Jersey. I was trained in homicide investigation, fingerprint identification, domestic violence investigation, narcotics trafficking. I have been a licensed investigator in the state of New Jersey. Coming out here in Arizona, I joined Sheriff Arpaio's posse, and ultimately in 2007, I was asked by Sheriff Arpaio if I would head up a cold case unit for him. Primary goal was to assist in cold case investigations with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I subsequently been trained in MCSO, MCSO acronym for Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, AZ Post-Certified Homicide Investigation, Cold Case Investigation. I had training in fugitive detection and apprehension, high-risk criminal behavior. And going forward, right now, currently, I am chief investigator for Sheriff Joe Arpaio into the eligibility issue of Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate and ultimately his eligibility to be president of the United States.
Right. And what a resume that is. That is extremely impressive. And I think what the American people need to understand is that this is now a criminal investigation being undertaken by a person who has law enforcement authority. You represent Sheriff Arpaio in this investigation. So this is not just another pundit talking. This is not just another radio talk show host. This is an officer of the law that stands before us and is telling us that he has uncovered damning evidence that the certificate is a forgery. Lieutenant Zullo, can you explain to the American people what exactly you have found that convinces you 100% that this is a forged document?
Well, we believe after a 21-month investigation, we are firmly of the belief that the long-form birth certificate presented to the public in a PDF form never started out as an original paper document. It's not a copy of an original paper document. It is a document that has been created exclusively inside a computer. It was fabricated manually by human intervention, put together in layers to give the appearance of an official birth certificate. But the fact of the matter is, after putting this PDF file through 1,200 forensic tests, we discovered that every layer on this document was put together by hand in a cut and paste piecemeal method to give the impression to the unsuspecting public that this is in fact a true representation of the president's birth certificate. And after coming to this conclusion, we took that document, we took our findings, and we submitted them for review to a certified forensic document examiner. This is someone who's recognized as an expert in numerous court and trial proceedings. He did his review, and his conclusion after giving me a 40-page document was that the document is 100% fabricated in his opinion.
Right.
Now,
And do you think that there's any way that his testimony, you're talking about Reed Hayes, you think that his testimony can be discredited in any way by those who seek to say that all of this is a political witch hunt of some kind?
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, Reed Hayes resides in Hawaii. Reed Hayes is a Democrat. Reed Hayes voted for Mr. Obama. Reed Hayes has testified in numerous cases for the state of Hawaii. And as fate would have it, Reed Hayes also did work and testified on behalf of Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie is the law firm that represents Mr. Obama in every one of these eligibility challenges that have been going on around the country. So it's going to be very difficult to impeach Mr. Hayes because Perkins Coie relied on him as an expert in courtroom testimony in previous cases. So it's going to pose a very big problem for this administration and for the law firm that they use representing the president in these kinds of matters.
Right. I was really most impressed by that. And his report to you is a sworn affidavit, meaning that if he has lied in any way, that would be subject to charges of perjury. Is that not correct?
That's correct. He gave me a sworn affidavit attesting to the material in it. He did his own independent research, his own independent study. And, we really just put it out there. This is not a political witch hunt. We put it out there. This is our methodology. This is what we did. Do you concur? And, in fact, he did. And he was astonished when he looked at that document. And when he looked at that document, originally he was reluctant, didn't really want to do this. And I asked him just to take a cursory look at it. And after I sent him the PDF file, he calls me back and he goes, there's something wrong with this. And I explained to him that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. And it took him about 2 to 3 weeks, if my memory serves me. And he forwarded us a 40-page report coming to that conclusion. I mean, that conclusion is devastating.
It is absolutely devastating, especially since, as you said, he has worked for Perkins Coie. So his credentials are impeccable. And you have others that have impeccable credentials, those who did the 1,200 computer forensic analysis, right?
We do. These people have been in computer science since, I believe, 1978. They have done work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And, our goal in this was not to find this document null and void. Actually, we thought we were going to clear this document. We thought the sheriff thought that this was going to be a 48-hour matter, and this thing would be okay. We would announce it to the world that it was fine and just move the country beyond this issue. But unfortunately, about 24 hours into it, it was apparent that we had some problems. These individuals that did the testing for us, one side of that equation was there to prove what we did. The other side, unbeknownst to the one professional who was trying to prove it, actually tried to debunk us or disprove what we said. And his was more important to me because at the end, he had to conclude he could not disprove our work, and he had to come to the conclusion it is, in fact, a manipulated document.
Yeah, this is absolutely shocking. I think every American out there who hears that just cannot believe what they are hearing. Now, I understand, Lieutenant Zullo, that you have recently gone to Capitol Hill. You're just back from a trip to Washington, D.C. You're trying to bring all of this evidence forward to our congressmen and women out there, right?
We're doing that. Sheriff Arpaio thinks that Congress really needs to look into this matter. It is really incumbent upon them, he believes constitutionally, to make an inquiry about this. And right now we are desperately trying to do that. And we do have interest. We have interest from a Texas Republican. His name is Steve Stockman. Congressman Stockman has expressed interest in this, and I am trying to arrange a meeting. I'm not clear yet whether I'm going back to see him or he's going to come out to Phoenix. But he is that interested that he's going to make the time, set it aside. He wants to be completely briefed by me as to what we have, and he wants to see all that evidence laid out before him.
Absolutely astonishing. And I think, Lieutenant Zullo, lots of Americans want to know what can they do to help you bring this forward to Congress?
You know, at this time, Joyce, what I'm going to say kind of rattles people. I'm going to ask people to kind of, hang on a little bit. Don't do anything yet. If we're successful in going the way we're going, if we're successful in getting this where we need to be, there'll be ample time to take measures to, for lack of a better word, push your representatives. But we don't want to start to do that right now. Right now, what we have to focus on is getting this before Congress. Once we get it before Congress, then we can do something with a grassroots movement to try to compel them to at least look at this information. That's the critical thing, Doctor. We have to get people to look at this information.
And that's what we're doing with that article in World Tribune. Have you had anybody come forward that has presented any evidence that can credibly contest what you have done, even based on the wide publicity we've now given this story?
No. I've put that challenge out there for the last 21 months. If you can come to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and show me how somebody's scanning in a one-dimensional document with a one-button push on a scanner, scan it into a computer, and show me where it recreates 26 anomalies found in the Obama document, I would declare to the world that we were wrong. It's going to be impossible. You may play with computer programs and get them to replicate some of these things, but you can't do it in its entirety. And that's what's going to be compelling about it. It's impossible. It was done by human intervention. A computer cannot do this on its own.
And now what I think that the folks out there need to understand is that you are not making any claims whatsoever about where the president was born or not born. I mean, we understand there seems to be some kind of document in the archives in Hawaii. The only thing you're saying is that this particular document that the president revealed is a fake.
That's correct. You think about it, the American people should be able to see this kind of document. Once it's offered by the President of the United States, they should be able to see the original. This is not an original of anything. It is not a copy of an original. The only thing that's original, it's an original forgery. That's all it is.
And a bad forgery, from what you and all your experts have said. Apparently the experts who have looked at it say that they can come to the conclusion that it's a bad forgery pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when this was first released by the White House, on the White House website, it was released, I believe, within 20 minutes. Graphic artists were saying there was something wrong with this. Those are just people out there downloaded this onto their computer, and all of a sudden they started to find things wrong with it. So whoever did this, my theory, and this is only a theory, that this document, this file, once it was uploaded, was actually uploaded in error. I believe this was a working file that they did not flatten, is a word that's used where you kind of condense all these layers together and they can no longer be taken apart. I believe that this was done in error. And in that haste, by 20 minutes after it was launched, I believe the number is around 130,000 people had downloaded that file to their computers. So there was no taking it back.
Wow.
They had to live with this.
Wow. And now you're right. They're going to have to live with it, and they're going to have to live with the consequences of having presented a fraudulent document to the American people. Well, Lieutenant Zullo, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. But more than that, thank you for your hard work and your courage and your skill and your tenacity in a very, very difficult criminal investigation. God bless you.
You're listening to the best of American Heartland with Dr. Grace Vuoto.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. You're hearing the sweet sounds of Miley Cyrus. Yet this girl is sweet no more, let me tell you. Her latest video is absolutely shocking and disgusting. I got to tell you, I know quite a lot about Miley Cyrus because during her Hannah Montana days, my niece loved the program, and so I would sit beside her and watch it, and I was part of that whole Hannah Montana craze because my niece introduced me to her. And as Miley Cyrus began the transition from the Disney pop princess, basically from an actress to being a vocalist, I followed her career as well. My niece dragged me to a 3D concert that she did. And, you know, at the time, Miley Cyrus was a fun performer. There was a lot there that I found enjoyable. Yet even then, I detected the seeds of her current destruction. When I sat watching the program with my niece, I said to her, don't you notice that oftentimes the theme of Hannah Montana is that the father is wrong and the teenager is right? By the time the episode is over, the teen knows better than the parent. And this is the problem with our contemporary culture. There is a constant assault on parental authority. This obviously hasn't worked for Miley Cyrus. Her own father, Billy Ray Cyrus, was part of the series. He allowed himself to be mocked. He was the father in the comedy, and he has made a whole bunch of parenting errors. And this is Parenting Errors 101, leading to the point that right now, he has a daughter who's in her early 20s, and she is completely out of control, but she's on a really dangerous track here. And she's produced a video which is absolutely shocking. In this video, you see this beautiful girl simulating sex. You see her doing grotesque acts like apparently cutting off fingers. You see her licking a doll. It is absolutely barbaric and disgusting. And here's a small sample of that video. Brittany, can you roll that clip, please?
To my homegirls here with the big butt, shaking it like we on a strip club. Remember, only God could judge ya. Forget the haters, 'cause somebody loves ya. And everyone in line in the bathroom, trying to get a line in the bathroom. We all so turned up here, getting turned up, yeah.
And those are the horrible lyrics in her latest video, We Can't Stop. What she's saying is she's celebrating drug use, and if you look at the video, she's clearly using the stuff because she seems very debauched and dangerously so. Now, why am I bringing attention to this? This is a really sad story because Miley Cyrus began her career really as a practicing Christian and as one who seemed to be very sweet and seemed to have a positive influence. When she spoke, she did tout her Christian values. But we've seen over the course of the last couple of years a very radical degeneration, to the point that her own father, Billy Ray Cyrus, has said in an interview that he feels personally responsible. And I want to say to him, duh, of course you're responsible. You were constantly promoting the idea that your child knows better than you do. And let's take a look at a clip from the show itself, Hannah Montana, where you see Billy Ray Cyrus playing the stupid dad. Roll clip 7, Brittany.
I vacuumed the house, no, 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 no. Dusted the shade, no, 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 no. I'm mopping the floor, I gotta get me a maid. I got the single dad, tired and sore. My aching bones can't take no more blue.
And there you have the audience that's just as moronic as he is, applauding him for basically sowing the seeds of his own family's destruction. This is what he himself recognizes now very clearly. What were his mistakes? Well, first of all, he's on a show where he's constantly saying that the head of the family is a moron. And I have to say, if you're the head of the family and you're saying the head of the family is a moron, you really are a moron, I gotta admit. Then what he does is just a whole series of mistakes. He allows his daughter not to go to college because, you know, she wants to pursue acting and she wants to continue raking in the big bucks. He allows his daughter to have a boyfriend live with her because he thinks he's going to be able to police the boyfriend, which later became the fiancé, Liam Hemsworth. And that relationship has just blown up in smoke. And that's another reason why his daughter is degenerating, because she's reeling from his infidelities, from all the reports that I'm reading. So basically, Billy Ray Cyrus created a situation. We had no control over his daughter, and he actually contributed to her life of sin. I mean, he did not protect her in this world of show business. And not only that, he brought the sin right into his own home. Billy Ray, have you ever heard the word no? That's what you're supposed to say to your children over and over and over again. And one of the first things you teach them is that you're in charge. You're the parent. You're not a co-equal. You're not a co-star. You're not a manager. You have the sacred responsibility of protecting this child. You have to protect her heart, her mind, her body, her soul. That is your primary responsibility as her parent. Not make her successful, not make her rich, not make her pursue her quote-unquote talents as an actress or as a pop star. What does all that mean? It amounts for nothing if you're losing your daughter now to this culture of drugs and degradation. That video is so grotesque that if you can't see how grotesque it is, you're lost. And I fear for her. I'm fearing for Miley Cyrus. I fear that she will end up down the same road as Whitney Houston and so many others who get lost in this world of drugs and we never get them back. And this is a larger problem with our culture. How many times do you see parents being dissed on television and in the movies? Everywhere you go, parental authority is being smashed to smithereens. This really, really makes me long for the days when you could sit back and watch a television program, and there in that television program, fathers and mothers were presented as the wise people. And if you followed their advice, you were generally happy that you did so. Do you remember Happy Days? I grew up on Happy Days. I loved Happy Days. And I so often love to hear how Howie Cunningham would steer Richie Cunningham in the right way. Those are the characters on the show. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Well, I just want to remind you how some of those episodes ended with parental figures asserting their role as the guides of their children, not as the co-equals. Brittany, can you roll that clip of Howie Cunningham giving Richie a couple of lessons?
Okay, Richard, what's bothering you?
Why? I'm in the shower.
Well, I guess that's where you were. Your mother says you've been moping around here for the last couple of days. Now, what's the problem?
Can we talk later?
We're leaving for Aunt Bessie's just as soon as Milton Berle is over with. I need a few laughs before Aunt Bessie. I can't stand Aunt Bessie. Now, what's up?
I don't know if I can talk about it with you.
Why not?
Well, it's sexual.
Richard, sex is exactly what a son should discuss with his father. I mean, you don't want to learn about it on some street corner now, do you? Now, what's the problem?
Well, this friend of mine, see?
Always a friend.
He said he did something because everybody else said they did, and he didn't want to be the only one. So he said he did, but he didn't because she wouldn't, and he was embarrassed he didn't.
I have no idea what you're saying. Your mother does that to me lately. Here.
Thanks. My friend lied to everybody about a girl.
Oh, well, it's obvious that the lie is bothering him, and he ought to go back and tell the truth.
To everybody? I mean, even Fonzie?
What's a Fonzie?
Arthur Fonzarelli. He dropped out of school.
Well, there you go. Howie tells his son, "Son, tell the truth." And in this particular episode, his son takes the advice, and when he tells the truth, he gets the girl. So this is the kind of lesson that kids used to get. Parental authority used to be reinforced in television shows, not constantly assaulted. And you know what's funny? As much as I like Happy Days, recently my husband and I, we bought the entire collection and we began to view it. And we realized that even a show like this, which started with many of the episodes with Howie Cunningham giving good advice to his children, slowly degenerated. And it became more and more liberal as time went on. And that's a feature not just of this series, but of television and movies in general, where the target is the home. The target is the sanctity of the family. And what do these producers want to do? They really want to do the most sinister thing of all. They want to divide children from the most wholesome, nurturing presence they could possibly have in their life, which is the good advice of a loving mother and a loving father. I gotta tell you, this theme is everywhere, and it's being targeted at our kids even at very, very young ages. Recently, Bill O'Reilly had a segment on his show in which he talked about the death recently of an actor on Glee due to drug overdose. And he said that basically we don't teach our children enough about the perils of drugs. Roll that clip, Brittany.
His death was likely caused by drugs. He'd been in rehab and was candid about his addiction problems. Mr. Monteith joins a long line of young celebrities who have lost their lives to substance abuse. We in America have become far too casual in our acceptance of inebriation. Young people should be taught that if they intoxicate themselves, bad things are likely to happen. And if they become addicted to a substance, their lives will be hell. That message is not being promoted these days. So here's the factor tip of the day. If you have children or grandchildren, make sure you tell them that any drug and alcohol abuse will hurt them and hurt their families. Don't lecture, just state. And always be open to conversations on the subject.
Well, thank you, Bill O'Reilly, for stating what used to be obvious common sense. And you know what I find surprising in that clip? As much as I can applaud him as being one of the few people to be stating the obvious, he says don't lecture. Like, what do you mean don't lecture? That's what parents are supposed to do. Since when do we get this idea that you shouldn't lecture your children? Where is all this coming from? This idea of equality in the home. It is crazy. And the ultimate object of that is to destroy the hearts and minds of our youth. I said earlier that this is happening at a very young age. I took my little boy to see an animated movie called Croods. And you know what was the theme of that movie? That the father is a moron.
You're listening to the best of American Heartland with Dr. Grace Vuoto.
Congress has pledged to engage in a full-fledged inquiry into the fatal helicopter crash that killed 22 members of the nation's greatest heroes. The fact that there's going to be a congressional inquiry is cause for great celebration. That's America applauding, and we are thrilled here because 22 members of Navy SEAL Team 6 boarded a 1960s-style helicopter in August of 2011, and they were set to go on a raid. Instead of completing their mission, they were shot down, and all 22 of them died, including some of the Afghanis that were on board. The moment that happened, the families, as soon as they discovered the facts of the incident, they cried foul. And they have been saying there is something terribly wrong with all of the official reports that they have been presented with. I had the great pleasure to interview the families of 3 of our nation's heroes, and I've recently written a very detailed report which is published in worldtribune.com. So please go there and read that story and, in fact, spread it around. Those families need your support. And what I chronicle is really a 2-year battle to get this story before Congress. There are too many unanswered questions, and that helicopter crash is extremely suspicious. Many of those folks that were on that plane had participated just a few months before in the killing of Osama bin Laden. So they truly are the nation's heroes. The fact that you have the members of Navy Team SEAL 6 who had killed Osama bin Laden, that, by the way, it should have been classified information. But Vice President Biden had to open his big mouth because the president at the time was going to run for re-election, and they didn't have much of a record. So Vice President Biden wanted to boast. And in a speech in Washington, D.C., he actually outed Navy Team SEAL 6. And as a result, many of those folks, they were petrified as they told their family. They believed that the vice president, by outing the team that had killed Osama bin Laden, had basically put a target on their back. And many of these young men, before they went forward in this final deployment, the families saying they've never seen their faces that way. They've never seen them so worried. They've never seen them so concerned. They received phone calls. They never heard them so scared. You're talking about an elite team, that the word scared and them, that those two things generally don't go together. But they understand the enemy. They know who we're up against. And when the vice president outed them, they began to fear for their lives. And there are just a lot of questions now about what happened in those months from the time that it was publicly known who had killed Osama bin Laden to the time that 22 of our elite fighters were put all on one helicopter, and there's just no explaining how that decision was made and how it is, according to official reports, that a lone lucky shot ended up bringing down 22 of the nation's finest fighters. I've interviewed Mr. Charles Strange. His son died on that plane crash, and he says very plainly, Dr. Grace, my son was murdered. I don't believe the report the government gave me. They are claiming that they can't find the black box of that helicopter. There's a black box that would have told us exactly what happens, and the official government version is that the black box was, check this out, it was washed away in a flash flood. You know, when I interviewed the lawyer, Mr. Larry Clayman, who represents the family, he said, Dr. Grace, there hasn't been a flood there since Noah was washed away in the ark. That's how preposterous this story is. And one of the things that the family finds the most alarming is that you had 7 Afghans who were set to board that plane. And at the very last minute, they were too afraid to get on. So this is leading us to a really important question. Why were they too afraid to get on? Did they know that that flight was doomed? Did the men who replaced them, were they suicide bombers? Were they in cahoots with the folks on the ground? Was this an ambush the whole time? The family has been saying we want a congressional inquiry. And instead of that, and instead of the answers that they have been promised, Mr. Strange himself was embraced by the President of the United States. And the President said, sir, I promise we will get back to you. And did he get back to him? No. Mr. Strange and Billy and Karen Vaughn and Mr. Hamburger and the other families have had to band together, have had to use all the resources to get this to the attention of the media, and they've been begging for answers. And instead of answers, do you know what the military is doing? They're giving them lies, cover-up, the runaround, and profound disrespect. And what I say to them is shame on you. When these folks have given up their sons for this country, you owe them answers and you owe them respect. You owe them to treat them as though their deceased sons were in front of you, because they have a hole in their heart, and that hole is going to be with them for the rest of their lives. You owe them to get to the bottom of this. And I've got to say, shame on the Republicans for not jumping on this story sooner. Finally, we have Representative Jason Chaffetz and we have Darrell Issa, who in a meeting in mid-June, they heard what Billy and Karen Vaughn had to say and other family members, and they said, we will conduct this investigation at last. The family has been begging for it. And instead of answers, they've been treated like befuddled, grieving idiots, when in reality, they're not idiots. They know that the bogus report that they were given contains nothing but a bunch of garbage. And we have pledged at World Tribune and here on American Heartland that we will not stop beating the drum on this story until every single last one of those men is accounted for, until every single last detail of what happened that night is given to us. We owe that as the very least that we can do to families that are going to grieve these losses for the rest of their lives. And I ask all of you to keep the story alive on social media and everywhere you can. When I spoke to Billy and Karen Vaughn, they said, you know what, Dr. Grace? Nobody in the national media wanted to pick up this story. Nobody in the mainstream media wanted to touch it. And Mr. Boehner in particular, we called him over and over again. And Billy Vaughn told me that, you know what I got? I couldn't get past his damn secretary. That is the kind of disrespect that the parents of deceased are being treated with. So I ask all of you out there to help me get to the bottom of this. Now, you know that I'm furious, and I'm furious because this is the kind of story that we should be talking about every single day. This is how we should be respecting and honoring those who died. And therefore, we will not let up. Speaking of scandals and speaking of cover-ups, we do have another interesting piece of information to report. Another piece of good news. Guess who has been located? The Pentagon finally found Colonel George Bristol. You'll recall that last week we said that the Pentagon had initially said they couldn't find him. Then they said that he had retired and they can't compel members who are retired to come forward to testify on Benghazi. And then they were outed by MarineCorps.com. Marine Corps broke a story saying the general is still on active duty until August 1st. He's not retired. Do you know what the Pentagon is saying now that they've been outed? They've been saying, oh, we're so sorry. There was a quote unquote, a confusion in our records. So at last, the confusion, you know what finally cleared up the confusion? The press. Their brains have been now cleared of this confusion. They found Colonel George Bristol, and this week he testified. So that's good news because he held a key chain of command, a key position in the chain of command. And he can tell us why troops that were standing nearby in Tripoli never went to rescue the 4 Americans in distress in Benghazi. He can tell us that. The only problem is this is the catch. Guess where he's testifying? In a closed-door meeting. I think we are beyond closed-door meetings at this point. What possible security interest is there in keeping this a closed-door conversation? The men are already dead. The compound was already attacked. We already know that it's perilous. It was so perilous that the FBI couldn't even go there for 2 weeks. We know that the place is in shambles. So what secret are they keeping? Oh, let me guess. Perhaps it's because they're following Secretary Hillary Clinton's line. What difference does it make what happened to those 4 Americans? That's why we should keep it secret? You know what the real reason they're keeping it secret is? They want to protect a very incompetent Democratic administration that has blood on its hands. We are nonetheless going to take our victories when we can get them. So we are going to celebrate for just a couple of minutes that there is a congressional inquiry into the Navy SEAL crash and that Colonel George Bristol has been found and is going to give his story to Congress. You're listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at World Tribune on WTSB.
You're listening to the best of American Heartland with Dr. Grace Vuoto.
I remember when I lost my mind.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. That's CeeLo Green going crazy because it is a crazy situation when you have the White House press secretary constantly lying to the American people. Jay Carney has recently been accused by Darrell Issa. He said, this guy is a quote-unquote paid liar. And you had some of the conservative press corps saying, how dare Darrell Issa call the White House press secretary a paid liar. Well, you know what? I thought the American people should judge for themselves. So I put together a list of top 10 Jay Carney dodges and or lies in front of the press. And at the end of that, we can ascertain whether or not Darrell Issa was right when he said that the White House press secretary is a paid liar. You know, the press secretary, he's supposed to speak for the president to the people. That is supposed to be an extremely honest and forthright conversation. One of the most disturbing things that I've seen during this administration is that very idea has degenerated badly. So much so, as you're going to hear in these clips, the press sometimes is mocking Mr. Carney. Sometimes they're outright laughing at him. So here we go. We're going to count down the top 10 Jay Carney dodges and or lies. Number 10, when Jay Carney was asked about Fast and Furious. Roll that clip, Brittany.
What the Department of Justice knew when they were giving false information to Congress?
First of all, I think that matter has been thoroughly discussed in congressional testimony, including 9 appearances by the Attorney General, including the 7,600 documents that have been provided.
And you know, it was full of lies. Many of the documents were actually being withheld, so much so that Congress held the Attorney General in contempt. Number 9, Jay Carney doesn't want to answer a simple question. What does the administration think the capital of Israel is?
Considered to be the capital of Israel, Jerusalem or Tel Aviv?
I haven't had that question in a while. Our position has not changed.
What's the capital?
You know our position.
I don't.
Chris.
I really
No, she doesn't know. She doesn't know. That's why she asked.
She does know.
I don't.
She does not know. She just said she doesn't know.
We have long. Come on, let's not call on Christy. Go ahead. We didn't schedule. We didn't organize the conference. It was a very appropriate place to have that.
Tel Aviv or Jerusalem?
You know the answer. Yeah.
We don't know the answer. We don't know the answer. Could you just give us an answer? What do you recognize? What does you recognize?
Our position hasn't changed.
There was Jay Carney squirming, not wanting to answer the question. And there are members of the press coming to one another's defense. That was number 9. And then there is number 8.
Telling the truth
Jay
on that
Carney
point. He was involved
having a debate
Involved in what?
with Ed Henry on Eric Holder, whether or not he lied to Congress about the investigation on James Rosen. Roll that clip, Brittany.
Naming him as a unindicted are you not involved after signing off on
Again, I would refer you to the Justice Department. But you guys are conflating, the subpoena with prosecution, and I think that it is. Again, I would point you to what the Attorney General said.
But it is a technical accuracy you're holding on to.
I'm not. I'm saying that based on what I've seen in published reports and what the Attorney General said, I don't see the conflict, but I would refer you to the Justice Department.
There's the runaround. The Justice Department lies. The White House press secretary gives a defense, referring them back to the Justice Department. That's number 8. And number 7, when Jay Carney was asked whether or not members of Congress had been fully briefed about the NSA surveillance program. Roll that clip, Brittany.
You mentioned the President's comments on Friday to follow on what Jessica was asking about oversight. On Friday, you referred to that. The President said, quote, every member of Congress has been briefed on this program. Why then are not just Republicans, but Democrats like Keith Ellison saying, I've heard nothing about this? He said he checked his email. He had his staff go back through records. He hasn't been briefed on it.
I can't speak to individual members. What I can tell you is that
a member of Congress has been briefed on it.
The chair and ranking member of the Intelligence Committee have made clear that every member was advised of this and had the opportunity for briefings. As was widely reported over the weekend, the Department of Justice and intelligence officials have taken multiple actions to inform members of these authorities, including providing in-person briefings and classified white papers. The classified white papers were provided by the Intelligence Committees in December of 2009 and 2011. Along with a formal request that the white papers be made available for review by all members. The Intelligence and Judiciary Committees have been briefed on these operations multiple times and have been provided access to copies of the classified FISA court orders and opinions relevant to the use of Section 215. I would point you to statements by other members of Congress about the fact that this congressional oversight exists. Again, I can't speak to every individual member. What I can say is that it is simply true that there is substantial congressional oversight.
There he was, twisting and turning. First he said everybody knows. Then he said some people know. Then he can't speak for everybody knowing. There's Jay Carney making a mess of whether or not members of Congress were fully briefed about the NSA. And then there's number 6. Everybody could see that James Clapper was lying to Congress when he said that the NSA only collects data, doesn't wittingly collect data about the American people. And Jay Carney was one of the few people who actually defended James Clapper Roll clip 6, Brittany.
Well, he certainly believes that Director Clapper has been straight and direct in the answers that he's given, and has actively engaged in an effort to provide more information about the programs that have been revealed through the leak of classified information.
Because even James Clapper said it was the least untruthful statement. He acknowledged that it wasn't fully truthful.
Well, I'm not sure which statement you're talking about.
This was the statement that I was referring to in the March hearing, where he was asked specifically whether all, I have the direct language, does the U.S. collect any type of data on all of the millions of Americans? And he said the answer to that was no. He later sort of amended it, but even in a conversation with Andrew Mitchell this weekend, he acknowledged that it was the least untruthful answer
Well,
he could give.
look, I think Director Clapper has, and the last week has demonstrated this, been aggressive in providing as much information as possible.
Yes,
to
Mr.
the
Carney,
American
he
people, to the
provided
press
information
about,
that he said was untruthful. And you have the member of the press saying, but James Clapper himself said he was gave an untruthful statement. Why are you defending him on behalf of the president? I got to say, that's got to be a classic Jay Carney lie. And then there is number 5. Do you remember when they said that the IRS scandal, it all emanated from a couple of rogue agents in Cincinnati? Roll clip 5, Brittany.
On the economy, Joe, he's not focused on, pretend scandals, right? That Republicans on Capitol Hill want to turn into partisan skirmishes.
Yeah. Jay, I want to get to the economy because obviously that's the most important thing. We have to clean up this one thing, though. I mean, you say that there's cherry-picked information on the side. Let's just take the IRS scandal. The fact is, it's far different than what you said. At the beginning, you said it was just the Cincinnati office, and then we find out more people in Washington are involved, and then this past week we found out, despite what any of us think of the investigations on Capitol Hill, and I see you smiling, I don't know that there's anything to smile about, that it wasn't a couple of crazy people in Cincinnati, that this information actually went up to the chief counsel of the IRS, which was one of 2 political appointees by the President of the United States in the entire IRS. So it doesn't
Joe, I
sound
greatly
phony
appreciate
to me, Jay.
Joe, I greatly appreciate that is the line that is being pushed by Republicans who want Washington to be focused on scandals instead of the economy.
Jay, that doesn't work.
These comments are just unbelievable.
You said, Jay, that this was limited to Cincinnati. That wasn't true.
No.
I want to talk about the economy, but talk to me. Don't give me talking points, because that doesn't work on this show. And you've been here long enough to know it doesn't work on this show.
Okay.
So answer
there
my
was
question.
Jay Carney in the hot seat on that one with not much wiggle room. You know, this IRS scandal. I was saying cancer. It is a cancer and a scandal. The more we learn about it, the higher up the chain of command it goes. And those 2 lovely agents in the Cincinnati office were so charming and sympathetic. We can clearly see that they were not the ones who were the purveyors of this scandal, Mr. Carney. Well, there's always number 4. When Jay Carney tried to tell us that the IRS report that was issued about the scandal was a complete revelation to the president and to top White House staffers. That, they initially didn't know much about it, and then we realized piece by piece how many of the people close to the president really knew about it. Roll clip 4, Brittany.
Participated in the failings are held responsible, and that the activity doesn't happen again.
But what I don't understand is if the White House felt comfortable with the counsel, the chief of staff, and other members of the senior staff knowing about this report, even very broadly, and was not concerned that just the mere fact of knowing it created the potential for interference, why couldn't the president have also just known that this was coming without interfering?
Well, again, because it's a judgment, in this case, the judgment of the White House counsel, that this is not a matter that you should, or that she should convey to the president. And that was her opinion that she expressed to other members of the senior staff.
Well, first they had said that nobody close to the president knew. Then they had to backtrack and say the White House counsel knew. And, of course, I've got to say, this one is a legendary Jay Carney lie. That's the one where he tells us that Benghazi happened, in prehistoric times. Roll that clip, Brittany.
Last thing on Benghazi, since the president spoke yesterday briefly about that, the Defense Department and the State Department both have written letters, as I understand it, to Republican Darrell Issa saying that they're not aware of anyone coming to them asking for security clearances for their counsel or anything to come forward. First, is that your understanding? And second, if someone were to come forward, if they just haven't technically told their superior or something, if they were to come forward, is the White House willing to let them testify?
Well, again, I mean, that's a hypothetical, but let's be clear. Benghazi happened a long time ago. We are unaware of any agency blocking an employee who would like to appear before Congress to provide information related to Benghazi.
Sean Smith.
You know, it's absolutely incredible. Incredible. Benghazi happened, oh, so long ago. Their memories are all going fuzzy. And then there's number two. Do you remember when they tried to tell us that nobody tampered with the Benghazi talking points that were issued by Obama and Hillary? You know, grab a drink and listen to this classic Jay Carney lie. Roll clip number 2.
John. Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
Well, I appreciate the question again, and I think that what I was referring to was the talking points that the CIA drafted and sent around, to which one change was made. And I accept that stylistic may not precisely describe a change of one word to another. No, I'm just...
These were underwent extensive changes after they were written by the CIA. Sure. These were concerns that were raised by the State Department that the White House directed the interagency process to use in making these talking points.
Well, I think
the CIA original version included references to Al-Qaeda, references to Ansar al-Islam. The original CIA version.
Well, it's obvious that Jay Carney believes that quote-unquote stylistic changes means drawing a big line along the words Al-Qaeda and terrorist attack. That's just the omission of stylistic changes. And here we come to the number 1 Jay Carney lie or dodge. Brittany, can you roll the drum? This is when even reporters start laughing in your face, as Jay Carney tells us that immigration reform is going to raise wages for the American worker.
Is immigration part of the economy?
It is. But I have no more details.
As you say often.
In fact, comprehensive immigration reform, I'm sure this is of interest to at least one reporter, would significantly reduce our deficit, would expand economic growth, would raise wages, and would enhance our, the creation of innovative businesses by...
You know that you're in big trouble, Mr. Carney, when members of the press corps start laughing in your face. They're going, you know what? This is not Jay Leno here. You're supposed to be the White House press secretary. You're not supposed to be a comedian. Everybody knows that immigration reform will not raise wages. Well, Mr. Carney, if you had any self-respect, you would resign. Instead, you are willing day after day to lie for this administration. We have given the American people a sample of your repeated lies. So you are a liar. You are paid to do so. And I think we have to concur that Daryl Issa is right. Mr. Jay Carney is nothing other than a paid liar. You are listening to Dr. Grace, crying out for truth and justice in a zombie nation. I'm here to uphold all the values that will never die, beginning with the cardinal value to tell the truth to the American people.